On today's episode of Ordinary People Podcast, we're going to address the history of the problems that's plaguing our communities, our world, and the people who are responsible for these issues. We're going to discuss that and plenty more on this episode of the Ordinary People Podcast. Welcome to Ordinary People Podcast, where we talk to ordinary people with extraordinary stories. I am your host, Alan the Great. In this episode of the Extraordinary Opinion segment, I want to address something, a specific word, in fact, responsibility. That's a word that seems to be lost in today's times. Responsibility is something that seems to be handed over or handed to other people. No one wants to take responsibility. Nobody wants to take hold of responsibility. It's sort of like a hot potato. You ever play a game hot potato where you're passing it around to the people in a circle? That's sort of how responsibility is being handled right now. Just like a hot potato or a hot utensil in the kitchen. It's being passed around. No one wants to hold responsibility. Now, what am I talking about with responsibility? And what responsibility is people trying to pass around? A lot of responsibility that people trying to pass around is the very issues that we deal with today. The issues with the inner city, the issues with violence, the issues where people who are getting ready to retire, whether it's in the next 10 to 20 years, are afraid that Social Security it will not be there. The responsibility that people fear hope is lost. You know, in conversations that I might sit in or listen to, I hear a lot of older people speak. And a lot of older people speak about the issues with the youth. How young women do not know how to take care of their homes anymore, cannot cook, wash clothes, do not know how to be mothers, how to dress appropriate as women, how to conduct themselves as women, how they conduct themselves on social media. There's so many conversations about the young men in this world, how they walk around with their pants hanging off their butt, how they don't know how to address a woman, how to approach a woman, how to talk to one, how to have work ethic, how to go after what they want, how to be fathers. There's so much talk about that. There's so many people who are afraid of the youth, and not just physically afraid of what this world is going to become because of who the youth are and how they act, how they choose to interact, what is their knowledge. But nobody wants to take the responsibility when you talk to the older folks that they are responsible for the youth being the way they are. They're responsible for the young women not knowing how to be women, responsible for the young men not knowing how to be men. They're responsible for not passing down knowledge on how to maintain finances, the world, how to build a future. They're responsible for not handing their children a future, a platform where they can build off. Where's the responsibility with kids who have to go to college, leaving there in debt? Where was the planning at from the parents before the children got there? Where's the responsibility that the inner city killings, the violence that's plaguing the inner city, had to start from somewhere? It had to start from some kind of breeding ground. Where's the responsibility for the parents to hand down that respect for other adults, that respect for each other? Where's that? It seems to be lost in today's times. It seems to be the look now is to just pass responsibility, to pass blame, to pass judgment, and to point at someone, and just to shake your head and say there is no hope for the future. But God forbid it's your responsibility that you may have caused these problems, right? Because that can't be true. Most parents say they did all they could to raise their children to be great. Rarely do you hear a parent say they did enough or they didn't do enough. Rarely do you see a parent step back and say, you know, here's an area where I should have addressed it. This is something I should have seen. Maybe I should have taught my children, my daughter, how to be a woman, how to make a man respect her, how to never rely on a man. Maybe I should have taught my children the importance of education, how much further they can go if they get a proper education. Where's the responsibility where parents may have should have told their children, not put limitations on their children, but to treat and teach their children not to fall victim to the limitations that other people set for them? See, I like talking to my grandfather. My grandfather just turned 80 years old this past few weeks ago. And one of the favorite things my grandfather loves to say is, back in his day, he could buy a pair of sneakers for 50 cents. Now, I don't know what day and time that you could buy a pair of sneakers for 50 cents, but in today's time, you're lucky if you can buy a pair for $50. Of course, my grandfather doesn't agree with the price of sneakers, but that's nor here or there in what we're talking about in the subject. So why did I mention my grandfather sharing the fact that he feels that sneakers should be still 50 cents? A lot of times my grandfather passed on knowledge to me, not in the form of conversations, but actions. How he treated my grandmother, how he raised his children. Not only the good things he done with raising his children, but often even in the mistakes he made. He takes ownership for it. He recognizes not only the success he had with his children, but the failures. He recognized when he could have did a better job. But see, there's something lost. That's lost. Because we try to hide our flaws, but try to highlight our success. Not realizing, but people need to see our flaws. They need to see our mistakes, especially the children, so that they have something to learn from. They have a platform to build from. A lot of times parents try to hide the mistakes they made in their lives. Hide the fact that you used to sneak behind school to smoke a little weed. That you used to skip class. That you snuck out the house to go to a party. Try to hide those things. Not understanding that if you talk to your children about these things, more than likely, they're not going to sit here and judge you for the mistakes and the things you've done, but understand they can be able to relate to you. Because within that, you can tell them the dangers of what you've done. See, we always try to explain to our children the dangers of what they do. We know when they're riding with friends, when they're smoking weed, the dangers of what they do. We often talk to them about that, but we never listen to our children, do we? We never listen to our children. We forget peer pressure actually existed and still exists. We forget that bullying still exists, but on a larger platform because now there's social media. So the bully has access 24 hours to your child. That peer pressure has access to 24 hours to your child. It's not like back in your day. And we forget that. We forget that in our imperfections, we can find perfection. We can find truth and solutions to problems that we all deal with. So the responsibility that I'm talking about here, when I'm looking at the inner city, when I'm looking at the youth, when I'm looking at Social Security, when I'm looking at all these problems, I'm asking this question. Is all these problems generated just from the youth? Or is it the generation that came before and the generation that came before them who made mistakes, made bad choices, made bad decisions, and it just filtered down to youth? And what are we going to do? We're just going to keep passing responsibility from generation to generation. It's this generation's fault now. The next generation, this generation will pass on to their children that it's their fault. Everything's going wrong from the music to the movies to the way they dress. It's their fault now. It's your children's fault that they don't know how to cook. It's your son's fault that they don't know how to be fathers, know how to be men. But hey, where's the men that teach you at? Where's the men that teach their children, not as adults, but as they grow, how they should conduct themselves when they go on an interview, when they meet another man, how they should respect a woman, how they should treat and raise a child, not just through vocal, but through actual actions. Where's that? Where's the responsibility that you're going to take that a lot of the problems we're dealing with today were brought on by you? See, you're so quick to point the blame at the youth and say that they're the problem. They're out here killing each other. But you never say and look at yourself and say, hey, but you're the parents to those youth that are out here killing each other. You're the grandparents to these youth that's out here killing each other. So what responsibility do you take in that? Oh, you can call the cops on them. But are you giving them your time? Are you giving them your knowledge, the education? Are you informing them the importance of an education, how far they truly can grow? Are you giving them hope in a world that seems hopeless? Are you teaching them to go beyond the limits, to go against the odds that were presented to them, that will be constantly presented to them, that will be advertised and marketed to them? What are you doing? Parents, if you die today, how many of you can actually say that you have life insurance where you can give your children something that maybe they can start a business, start a life, leave them something? How many of you can leave them a home? Leave them anything other than a pile of debt and a responsibility to bury you? How many? How many of you can do that? How much did you contribute to the problems that we're dealing with today? Again, we all have to work. We all have to work. We all also have 24 hours in a day. It's up to us how we use them. Again, sometimes our children don't want to hear what we have to say, and they don't want to listen. They feel that an outside source can tell them better than we can. But does that mean we should give up on them? That means we should give up on trying to reach them, to inspire them, to teach them? Or does it mean we just need to change our approach to get through to them? See, so many of us are wrapped up in our own self-interest, our own self-wants, in protecting the self-doubts that we live with, the mistakes that we live with. We forget that we're only adding to the problems that we deal with every day. And just because we don't acknowledge the responsibility that we play in the issues that's happening today, don't mean we're not responsible for them. Don't mean you're not responsible for them. So you can sit on your rocking chair on the porch and point at the youth, the young man with his pants sagged. But ask yourself this question: did you teach your children the importance of wearing a belt, keeping his pants up? Did you teach your children how to be men? Did you inspire your friends, your nephews, your brothers to also teach their children that? What part are you playing? What part did you play into the problems today? Did you teach your children about having self-esteem, having pride within themselves, and not allowing someone else's words or look to affect your pride? Did you teach your children that, you know what, even if you take a whooping, if you take a beating in the streets, that doesn't mean to end someone else's life? To keep your head held high? What are you teaching your children? Other than everything that they're seeing, everything that's going on is their fault. You go when you talk about and preach about negativity that's happening in the news, it's happening on TV shows, but then you're going and you're promoting that same negativity, but constantly talking about the negativity rather than trying to focus on teaching a positivity to these children. You rather talk about all the negative things on TV, all the negative shows, all the negative things they do, rather than trying to show them and teach them something positive, not focusing on mentioning and highlighting the negativities. That's what you choose to do. How many of you choosing to teach men how to be fathers? How many of you out here trying to teach women how to be women? How many of you out here truly more concerned with isolating, banning, and blackballing people rather than educating people? You have someone break a law, and the first thing you want to do, you want to lock them up. You want to give them a record. You want to make it so they're even more behind the eight ball when they get out rather than educating them. There's no excuse for a man ever to abuse a woman. But if a man ever done that, despite the fact you want to discipline him, why don't you educate him on how to treat a woman? Because obviously, if he is beating on a woman, disrespecting a woman, then someone in his life never taught him the right way to deal with a woman. So when are we going to take responsibility to teach them that? Rather than scalding somebody, to banning somebody, how about we educate them understand the importance of educating people. Instead of scolding somebody for making bad financial choices, how about we teach them how to make better choices, how to fix their credit, not focus on the fact that you made so many mistakes. What are you teaching your children? What are we teaching the next generation? What are we inspiring? Are we inspiring hope for the future? Or are we adding to the destruction that we are all seeing? The hopelessness, the despair, the destruction. Which one are you? Talk about the violence in the inner city, but how much you are taking responsibility for the violence and the prevention of the violence in the inner city. A 6-year-old was shot in the head while driving in his mother's car. That 6-year-old didn't have a problem with whoever shot that gun. That 6-year-old didn't disrespect that person. Whatever issue went on to cause that person to pull that trigger, that 6-year-old had nothing to do with it. Was that 6-year-old deserving to be shot in the head while just innocently sitting in the back of his mother's car? Absolutely not. That's a rhetorical question for you who are sitting here thinking on the answer. No. No. But despite whether he was deserving, and the fact that he wasn't deserving of that bullet, he was still the recipient of the bullet. And we got to ask yourself this question. Who's responsible for that happening? Was it solely the person who pulled the trigger? Or was it many others? What about that person's father who pulled the trigger? What about that person's mother? What about his friends? What about the people who could have reached him and told him there's another way than shooting someone? Where's the responsibility? Who's going to take it? Who's man or woman enough to take responsibility for the things that were happening and we're seeing today? You can cry all you want about Social Security. The God honest truth is I'm turning 35 years of age in about a week. By the time it's time for me to retire, if I continue to work the rest of my life, most likely Social Security will not exist. For you who are out there who do not know what Social Security is, it's an ability to pay me or an older person after they retire. At this point, I believe the age is 65. In the next 5 to 10 years, you'll have to be 70 years old to retire. Social Security will pay you so that you can retire for those who don't have retirement benefits in place. And honest the truth, most people do not have proper planning for when they retire. So without Social Security, you're going to work the rest of your life. You're never going to have that moment where you can sit back and relax. And who are you going to blame for that? You'll blame the politicians, the youth, society, financial choices? Or are you going to decide to do something to change these problems? To inspire change so that when you retire, you may have those benefits. Those benefits will be able to you. You will be able to take on those benefits. That's the question you gotta ask yourself. What part of the fence you gonna fold on? Or you gonna step back and say, look, I'm 65, I'm 70 years old, none of the stuff he's talking about with the future really, is gonna weigh heavy on me. It don't matter. So I don't really care what happened. That's a very poor attitude to have, because just because something don't affect you don't mean it's not going to affect someone you love. When you think about global warming, the way we treat the earth, you may believe or not believe in that. But the God honest truth is, regardless, you need to look into how these things are going to benefit your children. How are these things going to affect your grandchildren? And if somebody don't take responsibility to a lot of things we face, not just the violence, not just racism, but hunger, homelessness. What do you think is going to happen to your children? Gated communities can only protect you when you're in them homes. Alarm system only can protect you so far when you're in them homes. What about when your children go outside them homes? What about when your children make a wrong turn in inner city and find themselves in between a crossfire? Well, then will you think about all that you could have did to prevent that from happening? That just a little bit of your time, just a little bit of the ability to care enough to educate, inspire, and give people hope could change that event from happening, you don't have to physically go and take a gun out of someone's hands. You can do it with your words and your actions by educating them on what a gun do, on what are your other options. Rather than shooting somebody, where are your other options? What other options do you have? See, little things like that are the things you can do to change the things we're facing today. But you have to want to take responsibility for what we're facing. A lot of you listen to this podcast, and I appreciate the support, because some of you listen to this podcast just because you know me and you want to support me. Maybe you like hearing what I got to say. But how many of you are taking responsibility of utilizing what I'm saying, taking what I'm saying to heart, and putting it to work in your life to make a change, not only for yourself, but for your children? See, it's not just about support. It's not about supporting me, because I'm not asking you to support me by listening to this podcast. I'm asking you to support yourself. Support your children. Support your grandchildren. Support someone else. United, we can end all the violence, all the problems that's plaguing our world. As individuals, we just become another victim to what we're facing, to what we're dealing with. So instead of worrying about blackballing someone and continuing to divide each other and divide these lines, we need to find unity, common ground. We should all have the same objective. The violence affects us all. None of us are exempt from the violence. None of us are exempt from being hurt or killed by a bullet. None of us are exempt from dealing with finding ourselves in financial ruin. Didn't the recession teach us that? The Great Depression teaches that? None of us are exempt from that. So if you're not exempt, then guess what? These problems that face everyday people face you too. It's just a matter of when they're going to land on your doorstep. So today's the day to take that first step, to take responsibility to change the things that we are all dealing with, the problems that we're all dealing with. Racism needs to stop. Today's the day that we need to come together and first instill in our minds that racism can end. It can end. But it has to end within us. Because see, just like I'm preaching about people teaching these, not teaching people values and stuff. Racism is taught in the home. It's spread in the home. You are taught to be racist. You're taught to hate someone. You're not born hating someone. You're born with a clean slate. You're taught to hate. Just like you're taught to not be financially responsible. It's like you're taught to be violent. That's just like you're taught to be careless. But what if you try to teach something different? To inspire something different? What if you gave someone an opportunity to actually live a great life? What if you gave your children an opportunity to live? Not only to chase and accomplish dreams, just to live in a world where they don't have to worry about becoming a victim to gun violence. I know to most of you, a lot of stuff I'm talking about and I'm asking sounds realistic. But as I always say to you, many things you experience, you're dealing with, you're using today, many things you love, was once an unrealistic thought. So think about that. Anything's possible. You just gotta find hope. Hope in your community, but most importantly, hope in yourself. It's time to stop pointing the fingers and discussing and spreading negativity. Start educating our youth. Take responsibility to the part that we played into the problems that are plaguing our world. And look for a solution to change and turn them around. Are you going to take on the challenge? Are you going to take responsibility for your actions? Are you going to give your children a chance to live? That's a question only you can answer. And I hope the answer is yes. This is the Ordinary People Podcast, where we talk to ordinary people with extraordinary stories. I'm your host, Alan the Great, and once again, I want to thank you for listening, and also to encourage you to like, share, and to subscribe to my channel, Alan the Great, on YouTube. Check out multiple other videos on the podcast, and continue to spread hope, love, and peace. And if everybody else gave up on you, understand this. The Ordinary People Podcast will always find hope in you, love, and greatness and inspiration in you. We see the light that shines in you. And we hope one day you do too. Peace.